Attorney General Jack Conway will face Republican Matt Bevin this fall in Kentucky's gubernatorial race. We'll talk to Conway about the recent same-sex marriage and EPA rulings by the U.S. Supreme Court, his jobs plan for Kentucky, and several other topics tonight on Issues and Answers, the Mountain Edition.
Issues and Answers, the Mountain Edition, is sponsored by the City of Hazard. Come home to the mountains.
Attorney General Jack Conway, good to see you again.
Good to see you,
Welcome back
Steve.
to Issues and Answers. Well, there's a lot to talk about, a lot in the news in the last few weeks. I want to start with all the recent big Supreme Court rulings in the last week. Let's start with the same-sex marriage ruling. The court ruled same-sex marriage is legal in every state. Just first, your general reaction to that ruling.
Well, I told the people of Kentucky about a year and a half ago that I thought this was going to be the Supreme Court's outcome, that I didn't want to waste the resources of my office on something that was not going to stand up in the courts. And I think I made the right decision. I think it's important, Steve, to note that there's nothing in this ruling that tells a minister or a congregation what they have to do. But the civil benefits that are conferred by marriage, you can't pick and choose who gets those benefits. So the court came out the way I thought it was going to come out. I used my discretion, the authority given to me under the law and the statutes, to tell the people of Kentucky what I thought was federally constitutional and what wasn't. And the larger issue is that the jobs of the future are coming to states that have inclusive policies on their books. And I view this as a job creation issue. And I view it as a way to create the jobs of the future. I talked to a lot of CEOs. I talked to a lot of university presidents who said, please, don't appeal this, and we hope the court comes out this way, because look what happened in Indiana this spring. The jobs of the future are coming to states that have inclusive policies. And so that's why I've been focused on a jobs plan right here at the outset of the general election campaign, talking about how I want to create better paying jobs in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And but this issue has now been settled, and it's time to move on as far as I'm concerned.
Well, we've heard from a few county clerks in the last couple of days who say they're not going to issue marriage licenses right now. What's your reaction to that? Should they face consequences for that?
Well, I think they will face consequences. I mean, again, I go back, there's nothing in this ruling that tells a minister or a congregation what they have to do. You know, I support a minister doing what his or her congregation wants him to do. But when it comes to the civil definition of marriage and the tax benefits that are created, the survivorship benefits, the health insurance benefits, those governmental benefits, the government can't pick and choose. And a county clerk, if they don't issue marriage licenses, they are opening themselves up to potential federal court action against them, and they just ought to be aware of that. I mean, I made that statement yesterday, and it's completely accurate.
Well, obviously you and Matt Bevin disagree on the issue of same-sex marriage. Right after the ruling, he said, I'll quote him in a news release, "When Kentucky's marriage law was under attack by the courts, our own Attorney General abandoned his oath of office and chose not to defend it. Jack Conway's failure to do his job and defend our laws in Kentucky disqualifies him from being elected to the office of governor."
Well, I don't think Matt Bevin, who's only been here in Kentucky a short period of time, ought to be talking about disqualifying anybody from any office. I mean, I would say that someone who attends a cockfighting rally and then lies about it is probably disqualified from office. I would say somebody who doesn't follow a bipartisan tradition of releasing his tax returns when running for governor ought to be disqualified from office. I think someone who's got at least 8 delinquent property taxes and a number of liens filed against him in various states and then won't tell the truth about it, that probably disqualifies him from office. So what is clear, Steve, is that KRS Chapter 15 grants the Attorney General the authority to appeal something or not appeal it. Supreme Court case law is very clear that if the Attorney General feels something is unconstitutional, that he or she has a duty to tell Kentucky as a whole if something is unconstitutional. And when I raised my hand and put on the Bible, I swore to uphold the Constitution of Kentucky and the Constitution of the United States. And when it became clear to me that the Constitution of the United States was going to offer protection here, I did my duty. And I had discretion under the statutes which guide the Office of the Attorney General to tell the people of Kentucky what I did. So all of this nonsense and malarkey that I abandoned something is just political rhetoric. from someone who he himself is not qualified to be governor of Kentucky. So I'll just leave that where it is.
Well, let's talk about some other Supreme Court issues. They sided with you and 22 other states just yesterday when ruling the EPA acted unreasonably when it failed to consider costs in developing a new regulation that required existing power plants to retrofit their systems. What is this ruling going to mean going forward?
I think it means a great deal going forward, and I'm very pleased that the Supreme Court ruled the way it did yesterday, because there has to be a balance here. And what's happened under this particular administration is I think this agency, the EPA, has completely gotten out of balance. There seems to be no end to this continuing regulation and re-regulation of electric power plants in the coal industry in a way that has had a very detrimental effect right here in eastern Kentucky, with our coal miners here in eastern Kentucky, with electric power rates here in eastern Kentucky, with the closure of the Big Sandy plant by Kentucky Power, which I fought against and I continue to fight against because I don't like the way our Public Service Commission took on that particular case, and we've seen rates rise here in eastern Kentucky because of that. What the Supreme Court did is they basically said when it came to this mercury and air toxins rule that the EPA has to balance. They have to do a cost-benefit analysis and see, do the costs that people in places like Kentucky are incurring, do they justify the benefits? And what the Supreme Court said is, no, the EPA did not undertake that analysis, and you have to do it. And so I think that gives us great hope in the future. I think people ought to take hope from this ruling in places like eastern Kentucky, because I'm the only Democratic Attorney General in the country to sue on these new greenhouse gas emission regulations, the ones that would shut down even more coal-fired power plants in places like eastern Kentucky. And I'm hopeful, based on what the Supreme Court said yesterday, that they're going to take a serious look at the greenhouse gas rule, because the EPA, when they promulgated it, they did it because a bunch of northeastern states sued. Kentucky was never at the table in crafting the settlement. As part of that settlement, the EPA said that they were going to promulgate this new rule, which we now have. We have asked for the science behind the rule. The EPA has not released it. They're re-regulating another emission under a separate section of the Clean Air Act, which they're not supposed to do. We have a number of very good legal arguments against this proposed rule that's coming down, and I think we'll carry the day on that rule as well. And I just want the people of eastern Kentucky to know that on issues like this, when it comes to taking on my own party, that I'm always going to put Kentucky first. I'm going to put people over politics. And I think that what the Supreme Court did yesterday is what we expected they would do, and I'm hopeful that they'll continue to do it in response to the lawsuits that I've filed.
Another Supreme Court ruling last week gave President Obama a big victory when it comes to the Affordable Care Act. Doesn't really affect Kentucky that much, but Matt Bevin says he would dismantle Connect. Are there any changes you would make to the state's healthcare system?
Well, I think we have to continually improve it. But I think the Connect system shows that if you put all the Washington rhetoric aside, and I think where Matt Bevin wants to take us is right in the middle of this Washington rhetoric. I think Matt Bevin wants to have this let's get nothing done type of attitude. That's not what I want in Frankfort. I have a good relationship with many Republican legislators. I have some experience up there. My opponent doesn't. I have the ability to reach across the aisle and work with Republicans. And what we've done here in Kentucky is we've shown that if you put the rhetoric aside and you do it the Kentucky way, that you can implement healthcare changes that actually work. We have 550,000 people approximately now, Steve, that have health insurance now that didn't a year and a half ago. And that's making Kentucky healthier. I was at Mountain Comprehensive Care just yesterday, and they were showing, listen, we're getting a lot of people coming in here now who have health care who didn't before. A lot of these rural clinics are doing some really good work in making Kentucky Connect work. So we're going to improve it. I know, for example, the Kentucky Co-op, which is a not-for-profit option within the state exchange, needs some work. We need to make certain they're providing better services. I think our managed care organizations need to pay a little better and on time. There needs to be more transparency and oversight in those organizations that are managing Medicaid. We need to try to make certain we grow the economy so some people come off of Medicaid, because we do have a high number of people on Medicaid. And we will manage forward going to 2021 when the state has to pick up the cost of the Medicaid expansion. We'll see what we can afford and what we can't. But what I'm not going to do, Steve, is what my opponent would do, which is to conflate and act like Kentucky Connect and Medicaid are the same thing. They're not. The state created an exchange. We had the Medicaid expansion. What it is clear that my opponent would do is on day one of his administration, he would kick more than 500,000 people off of health insurance. based on some argument as to what we can or can't afford in 2021. I think that's very callous. I think that is very callous. And I am not going to kick more than 500,000 people off their health insurance.
There's been a lot of talk since this horrible massacre in South Carolina about taking the Confederate flag down, removing the Jefferson Davis statue in the Kentucky Capitol. First, about the statue first. So what do you think about that? Should it be removed?
I think the statue ought to be placed in the Kentucky History Center or some other museum. I don't think that Jefferson Davis is the equal of Lincoln where he is standing right now in the rotunda. I do think we ought to teach history. I think we need to be educated about our past. I don't think we ought to do it in a way that offends a segment of the population. But I've made my statement that I think that the statue better belongs in a museum. And so let's do that. Let's teach our past. Let's honor the way we make laws, and we strive for equal rights under the law in our Capitol Dome now, in our modern society. And then let's get on about the business of creating jobs. I mean, this campaign, Steve, is going to be about jobs, and better paying jobs. And I want to fight for better wages. I want to fight for more economic justice in places like Eastern Kentucky. I want to fight for an even better health care system. I want to fight for skills training and workforce training so that we're prepared for the jobs of the future. And that's what I'm focused on. And I think that statue is better in a museum, but I've made my statement on that.
Well, as far as the Confederate flag goes, you know, we've heard even in the last 24 hours, taking Gone with the Wind off the shelves, taking it off the General Lee on the Dukes of Hazzard. Do you think we're going too far with this?
I mean, I think, listen, Gone with the Wind, let the play go forward. I mean, come on, it's Gone with the Wind is a piece of American theatrical history. So yeah, let the play go forward. Let's just, I think we need to be sensitive to what's history and where we are moving forward. But yeah, sometimes I think some of the stuff is getting a little too far-fetched.
Well, you mentioned your jobs plan. The highest unemployment rates are here in Eastern Kentucky. How will your jobs plan help Eastern Kentucky specifically?
Oh, well, let me count the ways. First of all, one of the major aspects of our jobs plan is making certain that we get the broadband expansion right. The SOAR initiative, which has been undertaken by Governor Beshear and Congressman Rogers, is something that I will continue when I'm elected governor. I've always had a good working relationship with Congressman Rogers. I respect him immensely. We worked together very closely on the drug issue, and I've partnered with Operation Unite in some of our drug busts and working to try to make a dent in the prescription pill problem in this state. And SOAR has said that the broadband initiative ought to be built out first in Eastern Kentucky. I support that. Steve, we're 47th in the country in broadband access. A Washington Post article not long ago ranked the broadband or high-speed internet access speeds of the 50 states. We were 50th. And what that means is there are kids here in Eastern Kentucky that can't take an advanced placement class. Or if I'm your governor next year and I'm trying to bring jobs to Eastern Kentucky, they're not coming. They're not coming unless those businesses can connect to broadband, take orders online, participate in the e-commerce of the 21st century. So we need to build out this public-private partnership. We need to get it right and make certain that we have that vital part of electronic commerce coming to some of the rural areas of Eastern Kentucky. Obviously, fighting for Kentucky coal is a big part of the jobs plan. Making certain that I'm out trying to find new markets for Kentucky coal is a big part of the jobs plan. Worker retraining, which with the high unemployment we see in some counties in Eastern Kentucky, making certain that we train workers for the jobs of tomorrow is a big part of it. I was in Western Kentucky just a couple of weeks ago and met with the owner of a tool and die shop who had 50 employees. Was paying them $100,000 a year, running his plant 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 3 shifts, looking for 50 more employees and couldn't find them. That's a story in many parts of the state. We're at 5% unemployment statewide, but you can get into Eastern Kentucky and find counties with double-digit employment, some approaching 20%. So making certain that our community and technical schools are training the workers for the jobs that are available and making certain that that type of economic recovery comes to all parts of the state is something that I'm going to be very focused on.
How do you convince rural Democrats that they shouldn't be afraid of backing a candidate from Louisville?
Well, Both candidates in this race are from Louisville. I mean, if they're a Democrat,
but it seems like, you know, a lot of people, the state is turning more conservative.
Right.
So how do you convince Democrats who may have voted Republican in recent elections to choose you?
Well, maybe that's a more appropriate question,
Yeah.
because I think the voters that are watching this program ought to understand that both, I say I'm from Louisville just because I'm not trying to hide anything. And my opponent at times has claimed he's from Middletown, Anchorage, or anywhere. He lives in Jefferson County. We both live in Jefferson County. Number one, I don't think Jefferson County is a boogeyman, okay? Those are decades-old stereotypes that I don't think are really accurate anymore. Jefferson County is interested in the rest of the state, and I want the people of Kentucky to know that. Secondly, over the last 8 years, Steve, I've probably traveled this state more than any living Kentuckian. I mean, I've had 2 races for Attorney General. I've run for the Senate. I've been in their communities. I first came up, you know, I worked as legal counsel to Governor Patton. I worked on thin seam coal tax credits for him, traveled all over the state with him. He is supporting my campaign and vouching for how well I understand this state and understand Eastern Kentucky. I'm the only Democratic Attorney General in the country to sue the EPA over coal regulations that I think hurt Eastern Kentucky. I've always been good on sportsmen's issues and hunting issues. When we almost lost our tobacco settlement payment, the master settlement payment, I went and saved the payment, got an additional $110 million into this budget for agricultural diversification in the rural areas of the state. Amongst the AGs last year, I was National AG Chairman for veterans issues. One of my signature accomplishments as Attorney General has been to go into communities and talk about the dangers of prescription pill abuse. And we've shut down half the state's pain clinics and shut down the pipeline of pills from Florida. Look at my record. I mean, it's easy to slap a label on me and say, you know, you're from here. Take a look at where I've been the last 8 years, and then I'll tell you where I'm going. And I'm going to a place that helps all parts of Kentucky. Democrats, independents, Republicans, moderates, conservatives, and yes, Eastern Kentucky.
You mentioned guns. Every time we have one of these mass shootings, there are calls for more gun control. Would you support more gun control in the country?
No, I think we've got to enforce the laws that we have on the books now. You know, I have a membership card with the NRA, and I understand. I've been a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, always have been, and no, it's not something I would support.
Well, you know, Matt Bevin will try to paint you as a liberal who loves President Obama and Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi and people who are very unpopular here in Eastern Kentucky. How are you going to counter that?
Same way I said to you. You know, I was asked the question, hey, you know, did you vote for President Obama? And I said, yeah. Then I sued him. I did. I have shown. I think I've shown. You were talking about what my opponent's going to say. Let's not talk about what my opponent's going to say. We all know what he's going to say. The question is, what have I shown? You know, I've shown that I would sue the president of my own party if I thought he was doing something to hurt coal, which has actually put food on the table for many families in Eastern Kentucky, which also keeps our electricity rates low. That's an economic advantage for us, having low electricity rates. And we lure car companies, steel companies, aluminum companies because of those low electricity rates. So I have shown that I will put people over politics, and I will put Kentucky first. When it comes to fighting for agricultural issues the way I have, put people over politics, fought for Kentucky first. We had a bunch of cattle farmers in South Central Kentucky that were swindled in a very infamous scheme when a company called Eastern Livestock went down. I not only put the criminals away, but I got full restitution for all the farmers. I mean, that's putting people over politics. And look at my record, look what I've done. I spent a lot of time in Eastern Kentucky, not just traveling through and talking about law enforcement issues with drugs. I spent a lot of time in our schools, Steve. I mean, I go into schools typically 2 days a month to talk to kids and say, listen, I keep hearing that we've lost an entire generation of people to painkiller abuse in this part of the state. Don't you be the next generation. And I travel with 2 mothers from Eastern Kentucky who buried their children from overdoses. I mean, that's putting Kentucky first. So I'm a Kentucky Democrat, and when I get elected governor, we're going to do this thing the Kentucky way.
Do you think President Obama has been a good president?
Oh, I think history will judge that. I don't think he has tried to understand Kentucky or fundamentally gets this state. And that's been my concern, is that, you know, Kentucky needs someone to stand up for them. And that's the type of Democrat I'm going to be. One of the reasons I think Joe Manchin has been effective over in West Virginia is because within the Democratic Party, he said, listen, I'm going to speak up for West Virginia and West Virginia first. And so I think as a Democrat, I'm going to speak for Kentucky first. And one thing that, I say that the president doesn't understand Kentucky, I don't think he does. He hasn't spent much time here. I can tell you, I get Kentucky. I've lived here. I mean, my family's been here for generations. My running mate, Sandy Overly, was raised on a family farm in Bourbon County. She's someone who was a civil engineer, worked in transportation, has mastered the road budget, and wants to work with me to invest in places like Eastern Kentucky. I've spent most of my life here. My dad's from a family farm in Western Kentucky. I know this job and am ready for this job, and I get this state. And I think that's going to be a fundamental difference between me and my opponent.
One issue you're going to face if you're elected is the struggling pension system in Kentucky. How do you shore that up?
Well, first, I think it's important for the people of Kentucky to understand that we have a plan. We do have a plan. My opponent basically says, well, we're just going to start converting people to 401ks immediately. He even addressed a group of state employees and retirees late last week, and people were walking out saying he doesn't fundamentally understand it. I think what your viewers need to understand is that we have been working on a plan. When I say we, people in Frankfurt have. And over the last 4 or 5 years, the pension plans have been changed twice for current and future hires. We no longer have the same old pension plan in place we did. For current and future hires, what you now have is a hybrid plan. It's a combination of a defined benefit and a defined contribution plan. People have to work longer. We no longer have the double dipping and the problems that we had before. And we got into this mess because we didn't make the required payments into the plan for a period of 15 to 18 years. And the way to get out of this plan is to make the required payment for the next 15 to 18 years. We have to get through what we underfunded. And so each and every budget cycle, we're going to have to make that required contribution. The last time it was required, here in the most recent cycle, the General Assembly found some savings, took some money out of the road fund. What we're going to have to do, the next governor in the General Assembly, is find a dedicated stream of revenue that makes that payment each and every budget cycle, so that over the next 15 to 20 years, with prudent budgeting, we can work our way out of this. It's not unlike the mortgage on your home. I mean, the equity you have in it may be what you have. And what you've got to pay down is the unfunded liability. We're going to have a 15 to 20 year payment plan to get out of this mess. But the rules have been changed, and it's important for people to know that.
You've vowed to boost spending on early childhood education specifically. How would you do that and pay for it?
Well, first of all, I think this is something that we can't afford not to make this investment. We can't afford not to make it. 90% of brain function is already wired by the age of 5. The child that shows up ready for kindergarten is going to test well in the 3rd grade, the 6th grade, probably be college or career ready. And there's a big difference between me and my opponent on this issue, because he has said he doesn't believe in investment in early education and thinks kids forget it all by the age of 8. Well, that's completely contrary to the science that we know about early childhood education. So for every dollar that we invest in early childhood education, society reaps about 7 in return. And that's how you break the cycle of poverty in a place like Kentucky. So I would argue we can't afford not to make the investment. It's not going to be as expensive as many are trying to portray it to be. In fact, we can change the way some of the money coming from our tobacco settlement flows right now, replace it with some federal funding that's available, and make the investments. And I know how to do this because as Attorney General, I cut my office's budget by 40%. And for every dollar that the General Assembly gave me, we actually returned about $3.50 to the state treasury. So we'll be able to find the funding that's necessary for this program, which I think is so important to the future of Kentucky and for our kids.
You've already mentioned the SOAR initiative. One big thing that came out of that is expanding the Mountain Parkway. What other roads in Eastern Kentucky would you like to see expanded or improved?
Oh gosh, there are many needs. I think that we need to undertake an analysis of where is it deficient and where can we get the most economic investment for a road being built. You know, I know down in Harlan, for example, I want to make certain I get the number right, but Harlan's one of our most isolated counties because of mountains on all sides. You know, I oftentimes joke that going to Harlan's a premeditated act because you got to go over those mountains. But they've got an extension of a road down there. I think it's 460. I have to double check the number of it, but that needs to continue to be built out. I think we need to undertake some initiatives to make that particular part of the state feel a little less isolated. Obviously, four-laning the Mountain Parkway and having better access into eastern Kentucky is important. Connections I know between, for example, here in Perry County, oftentimes over toward Hyden, sometimes that's a tough drive too. So we got to look at the way we invest in our roads. Will businesses come? Will we have better economic activity if we invest in certain places? That's important, and that's the way I'll go about it. That's the way I'll go about it.
What do you think your biggest accomplishment has been as Attorney General?
I would say that the biggest one probably is approaching taking 1 million child porn images off of the internet, because it's over 800,000 now, and sometimes when you find those, sometimes you find a child victim, and it's really meaningful work. And anytime I can stand up for kids, that's important. That cybercrimes unit's a national model now. I mean, attorneys general and law enforcement from around the country have come in to study it, and I like it when Kentucky leads the nation. And also, what we do is when we get a computer or hard drive or a cell phone, the evidence of crime now is in a digital format. And when I first became Attorney General, I would talk to folks in law enforcement who'd say, I sent a computer off to Frankfurt, and it's been more than a year since we've gotten it back. Well, now if you send us one of those computers, since we created our cybercrimes unit, we'll get it back in about a week. We've processed, I think, about 8,000 hard drives for presentation in the courts of the Commonwealth over the last few years. So that's making government more efficient. I'm going to do the same thing. If I get elected governor, I'm going to do the same thing with the Kentucky State Police Lab, because it's taken them nearly a year to turn DNA evidence around, and that's too long. That's grinding the wheels of criminal justice administration to a halt here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. I understand that. You know, our KSP does a good job, and I salute the officers. But we've got to get that lab fixed, and fixed in a hurry.
Quickly running out of time, what would be the first thing you'd like to see accomplished if you're elected?
Well, I would like to see us tweak some of our economic development laws and create an environment where Kentucky's open for business and where we're creating jobs. I would like to have a major jobs announcement that really takes our unemployment rate even lower, and really send the signal that Kentucky's open for business, and that we've got a proud workforce here that wants to work. And that's a combination of getting companies in here. I've always said one of the first things I'm going to do is create an office of small business advocacy in the governor's office. I'm going to issue an executive order and put that there at the cabinet level, because 90% of our job growth comes from existing businesses and from small businesses. And too often they only deal with Frankfurt when they've got a licensing issue or an inspector's got a problem with them. And if they want to grow, they don't know how to access the economic development cabinet. So we've got to have a more friendly tone when it comes to dealing with businesses. Sure, we're going to enforce our regulations, but we need to be helpful for job growth, particularly with our small businesses. So that's one of the first things I'm going to do.
All right, Jack.
Thanks,
you very
Steve.
much.
All right.
And we'll see you next time on Issues and Answers, the Mountain Edition.